Greetings, salutations, and welcome to the Kreeger cast. I'm your host, Patrick Kreeger, and I'm joined once again by
Darrell Rivers.
And today we're here to talk about Christmas trees and some interesting things we've learned about them recently. I go to the same Christmas tree a lot every year. And last year, I was talked into purchasing a new type of magical tree. A type of tree that is now on the cutting, bleeding edge of tree technology.
So before we get to that, what was your kind of tree before that tree?
I believe Douglas fir.
See, my family was always noble fir. You can get Douglas fir and noble firs, usually. And those are still the two top tree brands in your normal tree lot. You know, types of tree, not tree branded. Noble fir. TM. And I think that not only is this new and exciting tree type, which there are two, a better tree, it's also, there's quite a bit out there on growth diversification. And that, you know, when you have these multiple species of tree, you know, if disease or some other circumstance hits one type of tree, you won't have a Christmas tree crisis. So the new Christmas tree.
Darrell's going to take over and give you the history of the tree, but I want to give you a few selling points on it. It is a lovely, deep green with a light undercoating. So what I mean by that is when you look at it from the top, it is a dark, rich green, but if you look at it from underneath, it has a silvery sort of hue. And that adds a lot of texture to the Christmas tree experience. But its huge advantage is the fact that this thing seems to stay moist and supple longer than any other tree I've had. Last year, when I got this tree, which is the reason why we got it again, that tree lasted until, I want to say, a week after New Year's. And when we threw it out, it was still soft and wet, which is really cool for a Christmas tree to make it through the whole season without becoming a crispy critter. And that's, I think, its main advantage.
Crispy critter. Wow.
I think its main advantage is that it stays...
Is that an industry term?
No.
Crispy critter?
But I think that's its huge advantage on the tree lot is that if you buy this tree, you can basically count that it will make it through the season. At least from my personal experience. Your mileage may vary. But one other thing I wanted to state before you get into it is the fact that this tree, while it is, like I said, soft and supple, it still has the strength to hold ornaments. Now, it's not as strong as like a Douglas fir.
Yeah.
But it's not as weak as... I forget what they're called, but there are trees that are really soft that look.
Yeah.
What is that called? Like a blue spruce or something like that, or you'll know it in the lot. It's the trees that often look the best, but will not hold ornaments. But Rivers, why don't you start with what are the two main varieties of tree that we see on most lots?
Well, we talked about this earlier with, you know, at your regular tree lot. There's often some odd ones that are, you know, there's Fraser that's out there. There's white pine, which is the super soft one. But the regular trees are the Douglas fir and the noble fir.
And my family was a hardcore Douglas fir fan. I think that has a lot to do with the fact that it's named Douglas.
Yeah. And then my family has always done noble fir. And I know my family was particular about the noble fir because that's they would go and cut down that tree. They'd go and get that. They'd go look for that particular type of tree in the woods and get that tree and bring it home. And so that's why we always went with the noble fir. And then there's also, talk about the tree lot that you went to because I went and visited it this week too.
So I go to the same Christmas tree lot every year. And the funny thing about it is they also do a pumpkin patch.
Yeah.
Which I think is pretty typical of Christmas tree lots, that they often do a pumpkin patch as well. But this particular Christmas tree lot has almost switched its entire production over to a particular type of tree because it is just so far superior to other Christmas trees.
Well, they had a lot of those, but they also had a lot of Douglas. They had a lot of, flocked trees.
Yes, flock trees are really popular. One of the things I've always been told about a flock tree is a safe tree.
Really?
That flocking is a fire retardant.
Oh, okay.
and that it helps keep the tree safe through the holiday season. I have no idea.
Is it coated in asbestos?
Now, I do know that I've seen people test this. I'm sure the Mythbusters have tested it. I was always under the impression that flocking a tree would make it more of a fire hazard.
Yeah.
But apparently it makes it less of one.
Interesting.
So a lot of people that get their trees this early on in the season like to do a flocked tree. Another really interesting thing, actually, is that you might have heard in the news that people are getting less and less into buying Christmas trees. That most families have a Christmas tree nowadays, more than in the past, but they're almost always exclusively fake Christmas trees.
They're probably pre-lit, too.
And there's actually another interesting little tidbit that I heard about these fake Christmas trees. You know what the average lifespan of a fake Christmas tree is?
I don't know.
Depending on where you are in the United States, the average lifespan of a fake tree is between 3 and 5 years.
Interesting.
Which is fascinating because they could theoretically last, multiple lifetimes.
Yeah. It's a little safer to have a fake tree in the old museum, and that one just sheds its needles. Just piles of needles. And I know that's on, it's probably 6-7 years old. And it's probably on its way out because of how many needles it's lost.
I actually didn't want to sidetrack our conversation here too much, but I think I really need to describe this to people. I actually learned this earlier this week. Most plastics that we use in our modern day society, people are told they'll spend thousands of years in a garbage dump. And while that's possibly true, that your piece of plastic will last thousands of years in a airtight, the way we store landfill these days, it's not conducive to things breaking down. But most plastics in a generalized environment, say dropped into the water or left out in the woods or what have you, actually only have a lifespan of between 6 months and 20 years.
Huh.
A lot of the plastics we use not only photodegrade, which most people are used to, but it also degrades with exposure to oxygen. So you might notice this if you have an old piece of cheap plastic lying around, for example, or soft plastic. For example, a Christmas tree. Its needles will literally decay from what amounts to plastic rust. It is oxidizing away. So anyway, I thought that was really interesting and might give you a little bit of hope for the future that if we just stop putting plastics into our ocean, they really will break down pretty quickly, relatively speaking. Faster than you've been led to believe. Anyway, that was off topic.
Back to this tree lot, because, for those of you that know me, I know Santa Claus. We're pretty tight. And I visit a lot of tree lots. So I know this particular tree lot has a really interesting selection of trees, and they were super into the Superior Tree brand that we're going to talk about. But they also had an interesting selection. And then I also went to another tree lot that same day in search for more of this tree, and I found one that I hadn't seen before. And it's going to be another up-and-coming tree other than Noble and Douglas, and it's called the Silver Tip. Sometimes called Shasta. Sometimes I heard it called the Silver Noble. But it's very sparse. And you can see the trunk. You can very distinctly see the trunk, and it has these levels of tree. It looks very natural. And I think it would only work in certain places and only with certain lights, because you'd definitely see the cords running down if you didn't put them all along the back of the tree. But it looks very natural. It looks very outdoorsy. It's actually, more than a regular Christmas tree. It looks like you literally brought this tree from the mountains.
Does it need to be shorn, sharpened? So is that why it looks more natural? Because it doesn't need that?
Yeah, maybe.
There's a lot of, for those of you who don't know, Christmas trees are typically shorn.
Yeah.
Into the shape that we think of them as.
Yeah.
Pine trees do grow roughly in this sort of cone shape, but the workers help them along.
So the Christmas tree dog herds them all in, and then they line up to get shorn. You know?
Yes.
Yeah. Then they all get a tag in their ear.
What's funny is that part's true.
Yeah. It's just like sheep.
Yes. They don't get branded, though.
No.
They run a little slowly.
Yes. So let's talk about what we've been getting to the whole time. The recommended tree of the year. Everyone that also knows me other than my Santa, for some reason I'm obsessed with the Ottoman Empire. I find Turkish things fascinating. And so when Patrick said, I got a Turkish fir last year, I was instantly sold.
So I'm going to give you the reasons why you should consider one of these trees as your next tree, and Rivers will regale you with a little bit of the history behind it. So one of the things, or the main thing about this tree is how well it holds up through the holiday season. We always get our Christmas tree the day after Thanksgiving, and we always throw it out at the last possible moment, which in our area I believe is 2 weeks after Christmas, somewhere around there. And last year when we threw this tree out, it was still soft, supple, moist, and wet. Like, it was like it would have been on a lot, which is rather remarkable for a tree that had lived inside for a couple months. And I will tell you this, it stopped taking water after about a week and a half. And those of you who knows that that's kind of your clock there. The other things to note about this tree is that its branches are strong enough to hold up most ornaments. They are not your weak tree that a lot of trees with this needle variety seem to be. I would actually trust this with a lot of my glass ornaments, whereas I wouldn't trust many other trees of its needle type. The coloration is a dark, rich green on top, and then from the underside of the needles, it has a silver hue to it.
And that's really the best way to tell, is your tree a Turkish fir? Is that it's very distinct that it has the two different colors.
And it really adds to it. You get some branches that go up and some branches that go down, and between the lights and the ornaments, it all adds to a general Christmas feel. And so don't be dissuaded by its name. It's a really fantastic...
Why would people be dissuaded by the Turkishness?
Well, people
So
might something really America.
Ugh.
And they're often grown in Oregon, so... But you'll be getting to that in your section.
So there's this particular type of conifer is called a Nordman pine. And the Nordman was a Finnish botanist, and he's the one that names this particular type. And they all come from the Black Sea region, so Turkey, southern Russia, Georgia, that sort of area. And one of the subspecies, one of the cultivars of the Nordman is the Turkish fir. So you see them, sometimes those terms are used interchangeably. They are two distinct type of trees. And we see this, the one you have is the Turkish fir, but they're both being sold in the United States now. And that's actually one of the more interesting things about seeing different Christmas tree varieties now, is that people are not only looking for a better tree, they're also looking for diversification, so that should something happen to that same strain of Douglas fir or noble fir, there won't be a Christmas tree crisis. So it's interesting to see all those different varieties come out, but the Turkish fir really is a profound specimen for Christmas trees. It's greener, deeper green than the noble. I'm sold on the Turkish, and not just because of its Ottoman connection.
Now, I will make an argument. There's another up-and-coming tree that I have not seen in our area, but I would argue is probably the superior Christmas tree.
It's not the Fraser. You just like it because of the name.
Thank you for bringing back Fraser references. We haven't had that since the beginning of the show. No, actually, it's the sequoia.
Okay.
There is a movement to get sequoias, or Sequoidae gigante, or Wellingtonia, or the mammoth boom, or whatever you wish to call the giant tree from the western coast of the United States. There's a push to get those trees to become a Christmas tree, because they're actually the fastest growing conifer, In the ideal environment, you can get a Christmas tree sized sequoia in like 3 years. 3 to 4 years. They grow a ridiculous rate. Some of them grow as much as 3 feet a year. So there is a movement to get these because you can kind of just pump them out. They're cheap and easy on the farmers. One of the problems, though, is people don't like the concept because they think sequoia, they think endangered, and they don't want to cut down sequoias. The funny thing is that while sequoias are endangered, maybe not technically, but they only really live in one area of the world, which is a very, very small region in the United States in California, and I think there's a couple in Oregon, naturally. They are, like I said, the fastest growing conifer on Earth, and they take to just about any environment. They don't reproduce well, but if they get man's help to grow, they can grow just about anywhere. So I would actually recommend that you take a look at sequoias if you see them in your lots and note the different type of needle they have. And I want you to appreciate that and consider it for a Christmas tree, because I would encourage Christmas tree farmers to grow these.
And that is Christmas trees.
Thank you very much for joining us, and until next time, dear listeners, see you out there.